Welcome to episode number 6. Thanks for joining. Today I sit down with Matt Ross, a great friend of mine and a former mentor. I met Matt about 5 or 6 years ago at Mountain View Faith Community Church in Rancho Cucamonga, California. And Matt was one of the first individuals I entered a mentorship with. He was also one of the individuals that helped me find a home church, which was Mountain View Faith Community. And he really changed my life for the better. You know, we did several different mentorship courses, and he helped me realize what I wanted to do with my life musically. You know, he asked me if I really love music, go to school for music. You know, he would tell me this. And so I ended up pursuing a degree in music, which I'm thankful for. And Alberto Salas is another individual I would thank for that as well. And so Matt was also one of the individuals, as you'll see in this episode, where I attribute this. I don't know if you would call it this, but I call it this. It would be a conviction within me where at the time at this church, they were not compensating. They were not, paying the musicians essentially. And so I was serving there voluntarily while I was gigging outside and doing different things of the church. And I would always feel this conviction to come prepared, come on time, know the music. And, I had always thought, well, I should only do that if I'm getting paid, if I'm getting compensated for my work. And that was not the case with Matt and the team there. Everybody served wholeheartedly, and they loved it. They loved worshiping there. They loved serving there. And I kind of was influenced by that. And I thank Matt to this day because I try my best to always help other worship teams whenever I'm given that opportunity to realize that even if we're not getting paid, even if we're making $50 or we're making nothing or, whatever the case might be, it's always our job as individuals, if you're a musician, if you accept a gig, if you take an opportunity where they're inviting you to play, whether you're getting paid or not, if you accept it, it's your job, it's your duty as a person with integrity to come prepared, come on time, know the music, have a great attitude. That was one thing that I learned from Matt that I'm super thankful for, and I still keep it with me until today, and I pray that never changes. But Matt is one of those individuals. He's an awesome worship leader. He released an album with his church, I believe it's Pike Peaks Christian Church in Colorado Springs. Check it out. It's called Kingdom of Heaven. It's available on Spotify and I think also on YouTube. This is also the first Skype session that you will see. I use this program called Call Recorder. It's not the best video and audio quality, but it gets the job done, especially because I couldn't get Matt here to California. If I could fly him first class Delta, I would have done so, but we are not at that point yet. So anyway, check it out. Let me know what you guys think. Episode number 6. Here you go. What's up, guys? This is Sir Kevin Says, episode number 6. I'm here with Dr. Matt Ross in Colorado Springs. He's a good friend of mine for many years now, a former mentor, leader at a church I used to attend in Rancho Cucamonga. How you doing, Matt?
Good, bro. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, man. This is the only way we see each other, right? Because I think the last time I was in Colorado, I missed you. I mean, I think I only went for a day. I was in Denver. And
That's right.
I did a quick event there, and then I was like, "Hey, man, I totally forgot you living in Colorado." And you're like, "What?" Yeah, we never got together. But what's new, man? How are things, bro?
Things are good, bro. Living in Colorado Springs. Have a family now since the last time I saw you. I have 3 kids and married to my awesome wife. Coming up on 10 years in February, which is crazy. So life is good.
You have 2 boys and 1 girl, or 2 girls and 1 boy?
2 boys and 1 girl. Oldest is a girl.
What are the ages?
6, 3, and 2.
Oh, how is that, man?
bro. We are in it. No sleep. That's how.
In the grapevine, huh?
Yeah.
That's funny, man. Well, congratulations. I'm so happy to see that and hear that, man. It's really cool to see all friends and from Mountain View getting their lives going, having kids, all those cool things.
Thank
So,
you, man.
yeah. So, Matt, tell us or tell the people a little bit about your story. How did you get started with music? Worship leading. How did that get going for you?
Okay. I got into music through church, actually. I grew up in Denver, and I went to a Catholic church for the first 20 years of my life. And I remember the day, actually, that like God zapped me with the music bug, man. For whatever reason, I was probably like 11 or 12. For whatever reason, that day, there was some guy there at church, and he brought his electric bass. And I don't know, man, it was like the switch just turned on, and I was just captivated with what he was playing. And I was just like, from that moment on, I have to do this. So I started, my neighbor lent me a guitar and taught me a Nirvana song because, and got an electric bass and just started messing around in my room playing the CDs. Had no idea what I was doing. And just loved it, just passionate about it, which was interesting because up until that point, it wasn't really a thing for me. Like, I liked music, but it wasn't a passion. And so that was the beginning. I mean, it's kind of a long story of, I'm not sure how much you want me to tell you.
No, hey man, this is a podcast, so people are used to hearing, 3-4 hours. I'm just kidding. We're not gonna go that long, but as we got time, man. So whatever you want to share, feel free to do so.
Okay. So I guess I'd say once there was a time, again, when I was sitting in church, and it was about time to figure out, what am I going to do with my life? I'm going to go to college. What am I going to study? Which is like a heavy decision because it kind of sets your path for life sometimes. Yeah. And I knew I was passionate about music. I was a junior in high school at the time. But I knew I loved Jesus too. I had an encounter with Jesus. But I was like, I don't understand. I don't know why doing music is going to be beneficial for anybody. First of all, you're probably going to be poor. Second of all, I don't really know like how this is going to serve God, because in my context in the Catholic Church, there wasn't really like the term worship leader or worship music, so to say. It was more liturgical, and so I just had no idea. Yeah. And it was really interesting because that day when in church, I was like in the youth choir, and we sat down to hear the message from the priest, and he, out of like nowhere, this like never happened in that church. He stepped down. It's a huge church, mega church, and he stepped down off the altar, walked over to where the choir is, and pointed his finger like right at me. There's however many hundreds of people were there, and he said, "You will not waste your gift. You will use it for the glory of God." Not there. This is weird. What is happening? And I really believe God was speaking through him, and I took that as confirmation that you need to go to music school. Wow. And again, I had no idea how that was going to do anything good, right? But I remember reading the Bible and saying, "Blessed are the poor." I'm like, all right, I guess I'm going to be blessed because musicians are poor. So I went to decided to start like taking lessons. I'd never taken lessons on guitar or anything like that in my junior year, and my number one goal was to get into a music school for jazz. So anyway, long story short, auditioned a couple places. I made it into DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois, for jazz guitar, and went and got my jazz studies degree there, 4-year degree. And thought I was going to be a jazz musician. Like, that's my career. And when I was there, I was attending the Catholic Church on campus. But a friend of mine said, "Hey, I play at this church, and they need a bassist. And you want to come?" And they paid $50. I was like, "Heck yeah, I'll play a gig for Sunday morning. There's nothing else going on. I go to Sunday night anyway, so it's all good." And this was a Protestant church where they were transitioning from like old style hymns and just organ to contemporary worship.
Yeah.
And again, I had no idea what that was. All I knew is they're like, we like rock and we want you to play rock and roll. Like, okay, cool. So again, long story short, the pastors there really like embraced me, mentored me, called out the gifts inside of me, and introduced me to this thing called worship and worship leading, and music like Hillsong and Tommy Walker. And I was kind of like, oh, this whole world opened up to me of this is beautiful and good, and people genuinely love Jesus. It's not like cheesy Christian music. This is really good. And so there I found my call. I found God was like, this is why I called you to go to music school, so that you could get some skills to do the work of ministry.
Right.
And that at that moment, I went, oh, now I get it. Whereas before, when I was a junior in high school, I had no context for it, so it was like it just would have been lost on me.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is. It sounds weird. It sounds freaky, so I'm going to say no. Instead, he's just, he knows if I call you to do this, just take the next step. Just take the next step.
Right.
So actually, 6 months before I graduated from college, I was already on staff at that church as their worship leader. And that was the moment where, I get it now. I see what you did there, God. Awesome. So that was the beginning.
Okay, so you were in Chicago for a bit. How soon did you come out to California? Because that's where we met. We met in Rancho,
Yep.
at Mountain View Faith Community. And I believe I went there in 2009 or so, 2009, 2010. No later than 2010. But how soon before that did you come to California?
Yeah, so I was in Chicago for 8 years, so 4 years in college, and then just being a worship leader and a jazz musician for 4 more years. So I moved out to LA area 2006 and started.
And guitar was your first instrument and only instrument, or do you play other instruments as well?
Yeah, I can play piano and bass and sing, obviously. So those are my main instruments.
Nice. One thing that I always appreciated from you, Matt, was when I first came to Mountain View, I was indecisive at that time as to what church. I don't know if you remember now, but I was telling you I'm looking for a home church, but I'm not sure where I should go. But I've been attending Mountain View and I really like it here. I had met Joseph, other, team members from the church, and I enjoyed the vibe that I got there. And I remember you met with me one day, and you told me something like, what are you looking for in a church, and you're like, and I told you the things I was looking for, and then you're like, well, you're kind of already answering your own question, because everything that you said that you want in a church, you found here. And I was like, you know what, you're kind of right, and since then I think we did a mentorship for a couple of months while I
Yeah.
was there, and that really helped pave the way for a lot of things, because at that time I was also unsure if I wanted to, pursue an education in music, what I wanted to do with my life. I was attending just a community college just to get credits, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to stay in school for a bit just to at least get my associates. But I think you were one of the first individuals that kind of was like, put it in my heart, like, you know what, if you want to do music, go to music school, get an education, So,
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I definitely got from the mentorship from you. And the second thing was, and this is something that I don't get to share too often, but one of the things that impacted me very much as a kid, when you were worshiping there, is that, no one got paid at the church. At least I didn't get compensated. That was kind of a rule for the
It's
musicians
just,
there.
I'm just
Hey,
kidding.
you weren't good enough, Kevin. No, and I remember, but you held such a standard at Mountain View, where you felt like, I felt like, even though I wasn't getting paid, I had an obligation to come prepared, to be able to, know the songs, be able to, flow through transitions. Just, you had charts, you had a metronome, you had all these things that were, you had already set the musicians up to succeed, and this is all without none. I mean, at least me not getting compensated. And I was like, man, like, why do I feel so much pressure? And it's because I felt like all the other team members, all the other band, the band members were coming prepared every week, and I was like, well, I don't want to look like a fool, coming into church and coming unprepared. So that's one thing that you're probably the only individual that I've experienced that with. It helped me too when I lead other teams or other bands or whatever, even if
Yeah.
they're not getting paid or whatever, whatever the situation is. It's kind of like there's an expectation of you coming prepared, and that starts with you, first. As a leader, you come prepared. You try and do your best to lead people, but you got to know what you're doing. You got to know their parts. You got to know how to lead them, and you got to know how to talk to them. And that's one thing that you do very well. So
Thank you,
I
man.
wanted, I wanted to share that with you. I don't know if I ever got to share that with you or not.
Well, I appreciate that, dude. And I think that goes back to like why God called me to music school, because as you know, and I'm sure many of your listeners know, that is oftentimes not the case. And like there are a lot of worship teams out there that are everyone just knows like, dude, it's a total drag.
Yeah.
And everybody hates it.
Right.
We're there because we're serving the Lord,
Right.
and nobody's prepared, and worship leader, and that sucks.
It does.
I mean, this is for the Lord, and this is His church, which He died for. And I'm not saying like some people just don't have the training and stuff like that. I'm not trying to give anybody a hard time if that's the case, but I appreciate you saying that, because I really think that is why God did what He did for me, so that leadership is exactly what you said, setting people up to succeed. It's not about you succeeding. It's about helping other people be successful in worshiping the Lord. So that's awesome.
Along what you're saying about success, what do you as a worship leader define as success for yourself, and maybe for other worship leading or other worship leaders that are all around the world? What do you think would be the definition for that, being successful as a worship leader?
As a worship leader, man, it's a big question. So I'll start with, I think being successful is obeying God. Sounds like a very cliche answer, but it's really true. So God is calling each individual worship leader on the planet right now to do different things. So we tend to look at the famous ones as the mark of success. So I look at Elevation, I look at Jesus Culture, whoever, and go, wow, if I'm not doing that, I'm not successful, so that is my goal. And if that's not what God is calling you to do, then that should not be your goal. It's a good thing. They're doing awesome things, obviously. But whatever it is that God's calling you to do is the mark of success. So just being obedient and saying yes. So that's really a broad answer. Sure. I think that should be the foundation, like, period. Beyond that, though, man, Jesus said the most important commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. And everything else is secondary to that. Yeah. So for me, I want to be a guy who's doing that. Number one, I want to be known as a worshiper, and not only by people, but most importantly by God. Right? Like we are in an interesting position that Jesus actually is pretty rough on. Like I believe it was the Pharisees, when he would say, Your lips speak my praise, but your hearts are far from me. Wow. Not acceptable. And you're going to stand up and lead people. Well, guess what? You're going to reproduce yourself if you're a leader. So you better be real. You better actually want to worship me. You better actually love me. If you want other people, if you want to succeed at your job, which is to lead people in worship. So, so that's the personal side. Then from a leadership side, worship is can be a very controversial topic and a very diverse thing as well. There's a lot of different ways to worship God, and my goal as a worship leader is to encourage people to grow in all of them. Typically, what happens is we gravitate to the expressions of worship that we prefer and ignore the ones that we don't prefer or that make us uncomfortable. For instance, if you're a quiet person, you tend to be like, I really like being reverent. I like being silent and I really don't like dancing and shouting and clapping and loud music. So I'm going to ignore those. Vice versa, I'm a cheerleader. I just love partying and I'm loud and I love to dance. And it's really hard for me to be quiet and like bow down and be still and know that he is God. And I believe that God says, I want you to worship me in all of those ways. So grow in the areas that make you uncomfortable, because really worship at the core is not about you. It's all about glorifying God. And if you're uncomfortable, that's totally okay. Matter of fact, it might be a good thing to be a little bit uncomfortable, because it means that you're dying to yourself so that God can receive worship. So anyway, I would encourage people, worship leaders, to not just like fall into your one little corner that you feel comfortable and the people around you like the most, but to encourage people to have a full range of biblical expressions of worship, and to really do what Jesus said, to love him with everything, and not just the stuff that you like.
Man, thank you, Matt. One of the things about that I'm already appreciating from this podcast is that, the questions that I'm asking you, they're very general, but I like the fact that you're not giving just a general answer. I think what worship leaders and what, I think Christians in general have to know is, loving God first. As a believer, that's your first call. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your strength, all your might. Secondary to that is everything that follows. This past week, I just had released an episode on value, on prioritizing, and on not burning yourself out. When it comes to burning yourself out, how do you prevent that? Because you've done worship leading for what, 15 years now, maybe more than that.
Years, yeah.
How do you not burn yourself out?
Oh, that's a great question, dude. I was very blessed to have my very first pastors in Chicago, David and Amy Artman, that mentored me and called the gift out of me and called the calling out of me. Started with that. They said, Matt, we see a calling in ministry for you. And we also know that most people who lead ministry or pastors or whatever burn out. And you're like 21. So we don't want that to happen. We don't want you to be 23 and quitting. We want you to serve the Lord for your life. And so heads up, here are some things to watch out for. So I was really, really blessed to have people teach me that from the very beginning. And really the short answer is boundaries, healthy boundaries, where, like Paul says, don't sprint, run the race to win it. So that when you get to the end of your life, you can say, I didn't fail, like I didn't quit, I didn't burn out. So the challenge, though, is that when you're in ministry, there's never like an easy no, because everything that's presented is good most of the time. Like we're serving the Lord, and it's hard to say no to a good thing. And I would say that I have a lot of answers to this, bro, but one thing that Pastor Steve at Mountain View, Pastor Steve DeYoung, would say that really changed my life is not every good idea is a God idea. Not every God idea seems like a good idea at the time. So just quote that. That's like, dude, that changed my life, because you can get lost in the land of good ideas. And it goes right back to what I said before about what is God calling you to do, because you could do 100 million good things and avoid the one thing that God's calling you to do. And so just knowing that gives you permission to say, no, I can't go to this Bible study for the 20th time because I need to rest, or I need to be memorizing my music for Sunday, right? That's just one example, but just having some boundaries and the discipline to say yes to what God's calling you to do and no to a lot of other good things.
Wow, thank you. Okay, so this is one thing that's a personal question of mine, and this is something that I think, now that I'm remembering, because I always pay attention to, I think as a worship drummer, it's important to pay attention to the worship leader in any scenario because they're the ones that are leading the people. They're the ones that are leading the band. So if they feel like repeating, they'll do this. If they want to go back to the chorus, they always throw up hand signals to kind of lead the next part. How influential has Tommy Walker been to your life? Because when I remember at Mountain View, you had posture and even mannerisms that of Tommy. Because when when I play with Tommy, I see that he does the same thing. I'm like, who did this first? Was it Matt or was it Tommy?
Oh, it was definitely Tommy, bro. It was definitely Tommy. Absolutely. Yeah, to answer your question, Tommy has been huge. He was a huge part of me answering the call to be a worship leader because if you know Tommy, he's an amazing worship leader, musician, and just super humble, right? There's no arrogance in that guy at all. So that's very attractive to me. And when I first saw him and heard his music, I was like, oh, like I said, it's not cheesy. Yeah. It's like interesting, and there's like actually changes happening here. Right. Pushes, like, oh, that's cool. So yeah, I'll be vulnerable and tell you, like, from the very beginning. Like I said, I had no context for this in growing up. Like a jazz musician would transcribe like a saxophone solo or something, and you learn every note and their inflection and their phrasing and all of that. I did that with Tommy because, at the time, he was the only like male worship leader that I knew of. Beyond that, it was Darlene Check and Hillsong. Yeah. And I wasn't a girl, so with him, like, dude, I could tell you every lick he's ever sung on every album. I would even memorize what he would say in between songs because I'm like, that's so money, and I keep stumbling over my words, and it's awkward, and he's really good at it. So I would literally imitate him. Yeah. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but I think that really, like, get away from worship leading. Just good musicians know the value of imitating. Right? Yeah. Imitate, assimilate, and then once you start to gain these vocabulary words, you get to learn your own voice. Right. But if you skip that process, your voice is immature. And so I took what I was learning in the jazz world and applied it to worship leading, and particularly Tommy Walker. And then, of course, I found Israel Houghton and was like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe this is in my ears right now. It's so amazing. And, just started copying people. So yeah, I totally am influenced by Tommy. It's easy to see.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm on my own, because I know not everybody's seen you lead worship. I think, a lot of people have seen Tommy and all these things, but I was like, man, there's 2 and 2 together, and then when you guys met, it's like you guys are equally the same height. I'm here at 5'5", like talking up to you guys all the time,
Totally.
That's funny, man. Yeah, I seeing Tommy, just the mannerisms. I don't know why. I see that, like, even with Israel Houghton, I see similarities between BJ Putnam and Israel. When BJ leads, it's like I see a spitting image of Israel here, and he always admits that Israel is such a, has influenced him so much in his music. So, all right. So Matt, let's talk a little bit about your least favorite moment in worship and your favorite moment in worship.
Oh man.
And it can be embarrassing. It can be, one of those, I don't know, whatever you want to, anything you want to share.
All right. Start with the least favorite. I have a lot. I have 3 actually that I want to share because you're in one of them. We'll do that one last. One of them was in California where we're doing a new song. I think it was I'm Not Ashamed by Ricardo Sanchez, maybe. Okay. And I was like, all right, church, we can do this new song, but I want to teach you the chorus so you know how to sing it when we get to it. Another thing I stole from Tommy. Yeah. And I'm like, so let me sing it for you. It goes like this. And of course, completely blanked. Have no idea how the song goes. I totally forgot. And everyone's looking at me like, go ahead, man. How does it go? And I'm looking over at Scott Britton on the guitar, and he's like, it's an E chord. I'm like, I know what chord it is. I can't remember how the melody goes. So just like totally humiliating. Fine. I don't know how we got it, but we got there. Another time was back in Chicago. We had, our church was mobile, and it was in a active movie theater. So we had to pack in and pack out every Sunday. And I remember the song. We were doing How Good and Pleasant by Tommy. And all of a sudden, all of the sound went out. 100%. The only thing that you could hear was the singers going, praise the Lord, praise the Lord, and the drummer, because he's got drums. Exactly. And we're like, the pastors weren't there that day. It was just me. We had volunteer sound people, volunteer everybody. And I'm like, the sound is gone. What do I do? And so I'm like, all right, just keep praise the Lord, just keep looping. And I had to like take my guitar off, walk up to the soundboard, look at it, and then people are still clapping, praise the Lord. I'm like, I have no idea what's happening. Well, it turns out that the bassist was standing next to the power strip that had power to the whole room, and he accidentally just stepped on it and turned it off. And then he realized, and he just like stepped on it again and turned it on, and everything came back. We're like, oh my goodness. It was like the longest 2 minutes of my life. It's just so terrifying. And then the third one was at Mountain View, and we were leading worship in the youth room, and you were playing drums, and I was playing keyboard. And it was like the most ghetto keyboard stand that ever existed. Like, do you remember this? You know what I'm gonna say?
I can't remember right now, but once you tell me, I might.
So like, it's super short, like too short for me to sit down and play, and I wanted to stand up anyway, bring the energy for the youth. So like, I had to put some Bibles down on the stand so that the keyboard would be high enough for my hands to reach, but it was like so janky. It was held together by like, a piece of string, basically. And we're playing, and I'm hitting hard because we're getting into it. And dude, as you know, that keyboard just went to the floor, dude. Like, it's gone. And it was like, what do you do? And I remember you always making fun of me. It's like, keyboard down, hands up, man. Just worship him. Just worship him. I mean, there's so many stories like that, dude, where this was not planned. What did we do?
I don't know if you remember the time, but before you continue, we were, I don't know if you were playing that day, or maybe it might have been Joseph, but Michael Josing, Michael, if you ever see this, thank you for doing this, man. I still remember this to this day. He was so excited. He was so engaged in worship. It was one of the, I think we were doing a Hillsong song. It might have been With Everything. And he gets just like, all right, guys, are you guys ready to worship? And we're ready in worship, like he's just pumping the crowd, all these things. He's like, let's do it. And he jumps off the stage, bro. He jumps off the stage like he's about to mosh, and these kids are like 5'2", 5'3", and he's like a 6-foot man, and
about to mosh.
Sorry, I just had to mention that because I'm sure I remember the keyboard stand falling too.
Yes. Lots of moments like that. Lots of moments like that. So many, man. Yeah. Or the drummer like counting off the song that's in 4 and then like ends up playing in 6. And you're like,
oh my gosh,
what are we gonna do now? Like just really scary stuff. So yeah, we could probably go on and on about all the worship fails, but
What about your most favorite, like something that really touched you? Whether it's, when I've asked this question, some people have said that their favorite moment in worship has been on their own, when they're in their studio, when they're, in their own room and they're worshiping God. And what's your favorite moment like when it comes to that?
Yeah, man. it's funny, we were just talking about this a couple weeks ago at rehearsal here at my church, and I definitely have those moments. A lot of moments I can remember privately, like in my car, just driving and listening to worship music, and God just kept nailing me with His love, and like just start weeping. But what's interesting in the conversation we were having at rehearsal was when I really started to think about it, I've had countless experiences like that in church, like with other people. And we all know, like, you have to do both. You have to have a private relationship, and that feeds your corporate expression and all that. But, like, I just really believe in the community and the power of the church, the congregation coming together. And it's just better when we're together. It just is. Yeah. So I've had so many times where I just can't lead anymore. I can't sing because I'm so choked up and crying and weeping because of the power of God that's in the room. And I just have to get on my knees, and it's like, worship team, just go, just take it, because this is just so awesome and so powerful. And another thing that's so awesome about being a worship leader is you just get this front row seat, just like you do if you're a drummer or somebody on stage, to see the people of God encountering Him and responding. And like, that's what I love about, I think it's so important to have a home church, because you see people that you know and you're doing life with, who are like, I know that lady has cancer. I know, and it does not look good. The doctor said she's going to die. But look at her, lift her hands and declare, I will rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will rejoice. And other people just weeping because of the goodness of God. What else can you do? It just comes out. He just takes over. And oh my gosh, dude, that is the drug that you cannot stop taking. Because, like, how could you ever say, like, that's not good enough? I'm interested in something else. At least for me. So I have private times that I could probably count on two hands, like some really intimate times with the Lord, but hundreds and hundreds of times with the body of Christ. God just wrecking our world, Yeah, I mean, I could, if you want some specifics, I could do that, but that's kind of my general answer.
No, that's good. I mean, like I said, man, like, this is, something where I want, the goal of the podcast is to share, these stories with individuals that, have been able to do what they do, for so long, and share the wisdom and even the moments, stuff like this that happens in worship, that you would say, this really touched my heart, this really impacted me in such a way where it changed my life. I've experienced that many times, even at Mountain View, when you were leading worship there, moments with Tommy at different churches, those are all moments that will stay with you forever. And one thing you hit on is, like, you see these people that are physically sick, they're not feeling well, or they've got a diagnosis from the doctor telling them that they have weeks to live, and you see them at church with their hands up, and it's like, to any other regular individual, they'd be like, why are you happy right now? Why are you lifting your hands? Why are you even in church?
Yeah.
Feel free to share those moments if you have some. I would love to hear them.
Yeah. One that comes to mind is two. I have where God spoke, and then one where God healed. So I'll do the healing one, where we're just worshiping, and it's heavy, man. And this is a good word for just church members to come to, like, you have a responsibility too, to come with a heart that wants to worship, and a heart that has an expectation of God to move and be there, which is very different from just saying, I'm just going to come to church and see what happens. And this particular time was, we were leading worship, and the people that were there that night came to worship God, and they came to see Him do a miracle. And you could just tell, like, the room is different. The energy in the room is different. The power of God is present. And the pastor came up and said, I feel like God wants me to see if there's anybody in the room that needs healing for their back. And I'm on stage standing behind him, and I'm like, I raised my hand, and he's not looking. He's looking out at the church, but I'm like, my back's killing me, dude. Like, I've spent a lifetime playing a Les Paul guitar. It hurts. My back was killing. And so everybody's like, behind you, behind you. And it's like, oh, the worship leader would like prayer. And, I mean, I had received prayer many, many times, but I'm telling you, man, when he prayed for God to heal my back, like, it's hard to explain, but like the Holy Spirit came on my body, and I just began to weep. And to what for those who haven't experienced that, what it felt like to me was like chills that give you goosebumps over your whole body at the same time, but at the same time like warm, which is weird. Those typically don't go together. And back felt better, like that. And I just wept, man. And it wasn't like, I've had other healings where I felt better, but I didn't have that like extreme, overwhelming sense of the presence of God touching my body. And so that was like incredible, where we were there to serve. We weren't there to be the ones being ministered to, but God blessed me, man. Like, I was the worship leader, but I received the healing that day, and was changed ever since. So that was incredible, man. Never forget that. There's another time. This has happened many, many times, but one that just comes to mind is I really believe that God speaks, and I do believe in the prophetic gift of the Holy Spirit. And when I'm leading worship, I'm not just trying to plow through the songs, but I'm always trying to hear what God is saying and what he's doing uniquely in each different service, even though it's the same songs for different services. And so one that just comes to mind, I don't remember what song we did, but we were just vamping at the end and listening. And I heard God say, tell them that there's somebody in the room that I'm turning your mourning into dancing. And so I shared that, and just exactly what I just said. I hear God speaking, and there's somebody here that God wants to tell you he's turning your mourning into dancing. And some people clapped, and it was like, yay, and that's a good word, and we moved on. That was it. But then like 3 weeks later at church, we had finished. I'm packing up my stuff on stage, and this lady comes up to me, and she's like, Matt, come here real quick. And I had no idea who she was. And she started crying. And she said, when you shared that word with me, that God was speaking to me, that was for me, because I miscarried my children. I lost my children, and I've been in mourning for years. And when you said that, it was like the burden of mourning was lifted. I was saying, I don't have to mourn anymore. It's over. It's time to live again. You know, you're like, wow, you know, like I couldn't have done that on my own. I couldn't have got in my office beforehand and said, like, okay, this seems like something nice to say at this service. It fits the theme of the songs, and it was just God wanted to speak at that moment, and it, you know, like, it blessed a person. So that happens a lot, and again, like, when you're in relationship with the Lord, dude, like, how could you ever walk away from that? You know, it's so awesome. So yeah, God is good.
Matt, let's talk a little bit about the recent album your church has released. How involved have you been in that process? Kingdom of Heaven. You know, how did it start? Like, the idea, and tell us a little bit about the process of putting out an album. You know, what's that like?
Okay. Yeah, my involvement of Kingdom of Heaven right here is I was the executive producer of it, and basically felt like about a year and a half ago that God was again speaking and saying, I want you to, I've given you and some people on your team the gift of of writing music and expressing worship through that form of music. I want you to do it. And immediately when we hear that, like the excuses tend to come up, like I don't have any money, I'm not good enough. There are more than enough good songs out there that are anointed, and what value is that going to have? Like, why would I just throw more stuff into the mix? All these excuses come up, and God really convicted me over the course of many months to say, stop making excuses, find a way. And I knew that, like I've done that, I've lived that for so many decades, but still the excuses come, right? Like nobody's gonna like them, or whatever. Just there's so many excuses, and God said it's enough, dude. Like I'm calling you to do it. Find a way. Just start. So I cast that vision to one of my part-time employees, who's Austin Gasper, who works here at the church. He's on the team. He plays drums and keys, and just incredible guy. And he also started at that time. Part of his job was to mix the audio for the videos that we put out from Sunday. Like we just want people to see what Sunday was like, the worship, and like just was killing it. I mean, it's never sounded better. You know, we all know what like a board mix from Sunday sounds like. It does not sound like it sounded in the room. It sounds terrible, and you don't really want to put that on Facebook. But so he like just really showed this skill to make us sound even better. And I said, wow, dude, you have a gift of mixing and producing things that I don't have, and I'll never be able to do it like that. So would you be interested in producing this album? Like bring those skills onto this project? And he said yes. And again, we had like no money, no plan, no songs, but we just started the process of, okay, we should probably write something. I don't know. Let's get together and write. So this whole album is different than a lot of the albums I've done in the past, in that the entire thing is a collaboration. Every song was co-written except one, written by somebody else. But that's awesome because everything is better and different than I would have done by myself, because there's a collaboration of artists. Austin's ability we had him produce it, like totally raised the level from anything I've ever done before. This is the best album I've ever participated in as far as quality, and that's because of him. So yeah, we pulled on every favor that we could ask of people, and every, borrowing things and just finding time and finding a tiny little bit of money, because people were just down for the vision to say, yeah, we feel like God's in this and we want to be a part of it. And so it took about a year to complete it, and came out in October. It sounds amazing.
Nice. And is this something that the songs? How many tracks do you guys have on the album?
So there are 9 tracks on the album, but it's really more of an EP because 5 of the songs are in the studio, and then the other 4 are repeats. I'm sorry, 6 of the songs are in the studio. The other 3 are repeats of some of those songs that we did live acoustic.
Okay, got it.
So I've talked about why we did that, but so it's really an EP, and then we released videos on YouTube of us doing those live versions of, because we believe that, like, it's this weird thing where nobody really listens to CDs, but at the same time you got to have one. People really watch music now on YouTube, and if you can see it, you're going to be more impacted by it than just listening to it. Right. So we chose to put some of our resources and effort into those videos, instead of 3 more original songs that may get lost in the shuffle, quite honestly. Right. So.
Man, that's incredible. Yeah, I remember when you told me about it. I was like, "Is it on Spotify?"
Yeah, that's right.
Matt, okay, so this is something I think that as a worship leader, and even just as a professional musician, how do you go about the first part of the question is surrounding yourself with musicians that are top caliber, meaning they're at the same level that you are. If you guys are trying to learn a song, they could do it in the same amount of time it would take you to learn a song. For example, it's not going to take them 2 weeks. Let's say that's the case. That's the first part of the question. How do you go about surrounding yourself with musicians like that? And then what do you do with the musicians that are not at that level? How do you try and get them there?
Man, great question, bro. You're knocking them out of the park today. How do you surround yourself? So, I mean, there's a general rule in leadership that says talent attracts talent. So, more easily said than done, I would say. But even if you have a small number of gifted people, that I would say that's better than a large group of people who really aren't that gifted. And I've just kind of seen that, like, it's actually pretty easy to gather a large group of people. Buy them pizza and they'll come, or put them on a stage. Like, ooh, look at me, I'm on a stage. I'm not playing tune to save my life, but here I am. Like, this is fun. And I have found that at first it may feel exciting and look cool, like, wow, look how many people I have on my team. But that fades quickly because you hear them, and it's like, ooh, that's really rough sounding. And that tends to scare away the people who are really gifted and called to be there. Exactly. So, I mean, there's a lot of different philosophies on this. We do auditions, so you have to audition to be on the team. My philosophy is you have to be a Christian, you have to be a Christ follower, because we're not just interested in excellent music, but we're interested in the anointing of God and the presence of God that can be kind of squished if we're not all on the same page spiritually. Again, more easily said than done. I mean, this really limits the pool of people that you can pick from. Not to mention, if you live, I've been fortunate to live in some pretty highly populated areas, Chicago, LA, and Colorado Springs. But I talked to worship leaders in small towns, and they're like, that sounds great, dude, but I got 10 people in the whole town who can play guitar. And they're not very good, what do I do? It's like, yeah, I don't really have an answer. But that being said, though, as a pastor, and you don't even have to have the title of pastor, just as a leader, there are ways to develop people and say, okay, if God really has called you and you want to serve on the worship team as an acoustic guitarist, but you've only been playing for 3 months, well, we live in this awesome age where YouTube will teach you how to play guitar for free. And there's more than you could ever learn on there for free. So go to town and come back, and I'll give you 10 songs that we're going to do in the next couple months, and just go learn those, and we'll see how you do. And that's different. It didn't used to be like that, up to 10 years ago. And the other thing I would also encourage people to do is if God's really called you, I can't teach everybody lessons, but you could go invest some money and some time into some lessons. That would not be a waste. So that tends to narrow down, I think, who's really called too. If they're like, nah, I don't really want to pay money for that. I'd rather do something else. Then that kind of shows you, okay, that's fine. No hard feelings. But if you want to be stubborn and just say no, I think you should still let me be on the team, it's going to be miserable for you, because like you said, everybody else is coming prepared, and you're going to look like a fool because you don't know what you're doing, and we're always stopping for you, and it's just going to be embarrassing. And that's not how serving the Lord should be. It should be a joy. And so, anyway, I would also say something that's changed in my worship leading over the last 3 years is the use of tracks. Up to 3 years ago, in my opinion, tracks were cheating, and not to mention they sounded super lame and cheesy. And so I was always like, no, it's got to be real. It's got to be an actual human up there playing. And that has changed, man. Companies like Loop Community and multitracks.com. I mean, you're playing the original masters of of the original people, the original bands, and it takes the pressure off to say, oh man, the keyboardist didn't show up today. How am I going to cover this on guitar and overplay like crazy? Like, we have that. It is cheating in a way, but on the other hand, it sounds beautiful. So so it kind of allows people to get involved without the pressure of being the Hillsong drummer or the Jesus Culture synth player, you know. So like, you can kind of learn without this incredible pressure of failure on you. So
I think the use of stems and using tracks has definitely reshaped a lot of. Because I remember, myself growing up personally, I didn't grow up with that either. I didn't grow up with tracks. I don't even think we used them at Mountain View, right? We never did. It was just always a click. And so when it first started becoming popular in the church, for me it was about maybe 6-7 years ago. I was like, man, like, I need to practice more, because there's a constant click going. There's cues. There's the actual drum parts. If what happens too on the planning center is people send the actual stems of what the drums does, and in the email they put, Kevin, I want you to do exactly what he does, minus the fills, do your own fills, but this is a pattern you got to do, and here's the drum track for that. So it helps you, too. I think that's also a positive of the stems. It definitely does take away, some elements where, you feel like you're not doing everything live. But in cases like that where somebody calls in sick or last minute change and you don't have a keyboard player or a bass player, hey, we have tracks.
Yeah.
And I think it's been a great help to the church community as a whole.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and I would add too, like, another big complaint from worship leaders is, I'm just stuck in this box. I can't be spontaneous. And that's true, but I would also say that people who really excel in spontaneity and improvisation embrace structure and limitations. And the people who don't, people who are kind of like, I can tell you're making this up and it's not really very good, it's typically because they haven't embraced any kind of structure. And so it's counterintuitive, because spontaneous is spontaneous. There are no rules. But really, like I said, if it's a jazz person or a worship leader or whoever, there's so many rules and boundaries and structure that they have embraced that makes that thing that seemed totally spontaneous sound amazing. But it came from this place of incredible discipline. So that was me, though, dude. Like, when we were at Mountain View, like, I was all about, like, hey, we're going to flow. I might do 4 choruses. I might do 1. Just watch me. Who knows what God's going to do, and we're excited about it. And we did it well. And I've had to learn how to keep that, the Holy Spirit's desire to do something unique in our services with the structure of tracks. Yeah. Basically what we do is we'll do the song as written, and then we'll vamp at the end and see what happens. Like, you can do it at the end. It's okay. Yeah. It's no big deal. God still moves. So anyway, it's different, but it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So Matt, being a student of music in general, you went to school for music. If there was some things, I wouldn't say just one thing, because I know as musicians we nitpick everything, and we want to, anytime we record a song or anytime we're recording our parts, it's like, man, I want to run that again. I want to change this. I want to change that. If there were some things you could change at a music school, say that you had the liberty to do so, and this would happen nationwide, for example, what would you change about structures from the school? Like maybe a certain class you would implement, things that should be taught that aren't taught at school that musicians should be learning, because you've noticed that some musicians that graduate come out and then it's like, you don't know this or you don't know how to do that. What would you change?
That's a big question, dude. I don't know, man. I think it's easy to say, yeah, my real world experience is different from what they taught me. Therefore, they failed me. But coming from a position of leadership, I know you can't anticipate everybody's individual real world needs. You have to like summarize things to reach as many people as possible. So you generalize. So, I mean, there were definitely like music theory classes that were just a total drag, and I've completely forgotten 100% of them. It was like 12-tone theory, atonal stuff, and it's just like, I'm never going to use this, and I never have. But for other stuff that were amazing, ear training was incredibly helpful, just super practical. There was one course that was I think it was a part of a jazz arranging course where we had to write for jingles for like commercial songs, and we literally so you had to figure out, you have a 30-second commercial and they're going to use this song from some like hair band in the 80s, and you have to write a certain amount and like for 30 seconds, but you also have to leave space for the guy who says like, fair warning, if you take this medicine, you know, you might go blind, and these effects, and so you can't like have any singing there or any kind of like guitar solo, and figuring out the timing of that. And then you go into the studio and you have studio musicians play your chart, and they better be able to read it, because you're paying big bucks. You know, the ad agency is paying big bucks for the studio time, and you don't want to like write something wrong. So that was, for me, that was like, oh man, this is so awesome. This is so real world and practical. I don't know. Anyway, I don't know if there's one thing. One thing I do notice though is like, I remember a lot of the vocal majors, the primary style that they were learning was opera, and they had all these rules that like you have to sing this way so it doesn't hurt your throat, and you can't like eat this and you can't drink this and all these things. But then I would go out on gigs on Saturday night, play like for a wedding band or something like that, and like all of the musicians are the most killing musicians in town, and they're all not that I'm saying this is good, but they're all like drinking and smoking. Like all the vocalists are singing Stevie Wonder and just killing, just destroying it. And we play for 4 hours, right? Like it's super hard to sing that long, and then they're drinking and smoking, and I'm going, wait a second, I thought you weren't even allowed to like eat cheese, and here you are doing, you know. And by the way, all of the vocal majors were sitting at home on Saturday night, right? Like, and everybody else was here working and making money and actually doing it. So to me, that was a disconnect, and it's a different style of music. It's not opera, it's Stevie Wonder, so I get it. But I don't know. I think, I guess I would say, to answer your question, like if the school can bring out what is uniquely in you, then that's a win. So not all singers have to avoid cheese. I don't think everybody should smoke, but some people should not drink milk. It just jacks their throat up when they sing. But some people, it's no big deal. So like, figure out what works for you, and be encouraged in your gifting. So anyway.
No, that's good. Thank you for sharing. I asked this to another individual that went to Berkeley, and you know, he shared different things. You know, even when it came to, you know, how to set up invoices. When you're trying to get paid as well, you know, for your work, for studio sessions or things like that we don't learn, you know, having a passport at hand, being a musician, that, you know, you want to make sure that you have everything that you need in order to succeed if you were ever to be called, you know, across the sea, you know, or whatever, you know. It's just always having things that you would have to have in order to be able to do things that, you know, require you to travel internationally or nationally sometimes, you know, having a passport at hand, you know, making sure you know how to set up an invoice, making sure that you know how to switch between this delay and that delay on a guitar. You know, if you're a drummer, knowing how to run a drum pad, knowing how to run Ableton and Logic, you know. I think those are pivotal things to learn in school that sometimes they don't really focus on.
Yeah, and I think that, so for me as a guitarist, when I was in school, there were two options. You could be a jazz guitarist or a classical guitarist. Those are the only paths you could take at school. And I was really grateful that I chose jazz, because it really informed, just the style of jazz informed the stuff that I ended up doing way more effectively than classical guitar would have. But I would say this, though, um, maybe the question is better to ask, instead of what could the school do better, um, I would challenge the individual to say, just like I said before, instead of finding excuses, find a way. So like I know some classical musicians, like some of the opera people just could never hang on a wedding gig and sing Stevie Wonder, never in a million years. So maybe the school failed them in that, but maybe not. Maybe the individual should find a way. Like maybe the classical guitarist should figure out, how can I apply what I've learned and the discipline I've learned in reading music and technique to playing a Bethel lead line, my church, right? Like, why not? Find a way instead of an excuse. You're not a victim. You're not a victim. Like, you're in charge of your life. So that's really my heart, is to say to people, like, just find a way. There are many ways to do this.
A couple more questions for you, man, because I know I know you want to get some breakfast and all those things. So, uh, how do you deal with tough personalities in a worship team, in a professional setting, as a leader? What do you do in those situations where somebody, let's say that they have the attitude of they don't want to be there, but they're one of the best musicians you have? How do you deal with those personalities? What do you do?
Yeah, man. I have the answers because I've studied this and done it for so long, but I'll just be honest with you and tell you, I handle it awkwardly and with fear, because I'm a people pleaser and I don't like doing it. So I probably take way too long, but I've learned in the years of doing it that it only gets worse the longer you wait, and it's like a Band-Aid. You can pull it off super slow, and it hurts really bad, or you can just rip it off and it's done. Like, it hurts a split second and it's done. So yeah, like if there's a problem, like Jesus says in Matthew 18, go to that person and address it. And if it doesn't work out, bring somebody else with you and kind of have them mediate. And so there's a process. But I would also say that it's not just, hey, that person kind of rubs me the wrong way, so I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off, and that's that. There's an opportunity to say, well, what's going on in that person's heart that's causing them to act that way? And as a leader, like, it's really, we're here not just to make great music and lead worship. We're here to love people and make disciples above that. So is there an opportunity to figure out what's going on and help that person through that? And I found a lot of times that, yes, there is, and it doesn't just have to be you're just gone, like you're done. And maybe that's my fear of having the hard conversation. And a lot of times it doesn't work out, and you have to have the hard conversation and say, this isn't working out, this isn't a good fit. I want to encourage you, though, to serve maybe in a place that's a better fit for you. But as a leader, we're going to be held accountable to how we lead our people. And if you're afraid about how that conversation is going to go, and I'm speaking of myself, it's really selfish of you. You're thinking about yourself, and you're not thinking about what's best for that person. Maybe that person has no idea, or maybe nobody's ever called them on it or cared enough about him to be like, dude, you're super rude. You're super selfish, and you're killing the vibe. And it may be hard to hear, but then after a couple months, or maybe even in that conversation, they're like, wow, thank you I had no idea. And it sucked. And I didn't like you for telling me that, but now I do. I'm grateful for it. And it could really bless their work life and their family life. Like, look for the potential, right? Again, don't find an excuse. Find a way, because God knows what he's talking about when he tells us to go do conflict stuff. So that's what I would say.
Good. Earlier in the podcast, I had mentioned, how you're one of the few individuals, actually maybe the only person that I know that has, required your musicians and your singers and just your worship team in general to come prepared. You have an expectation from them. My question, and I don't know if you'll necessarily be able to answer it, in detail. Hopefully you will. But how do you do that? Like, how do you invoke this response from your team without indirectly telling them, "Hey, I know that you're not getting compensated for this. I know that that this you're not getting any monetary value from this, but come prepared anyways.
Yeah.
Show up and do your part." How do you do that? Because you never had that conversation with me, but I always felt that from you. Like, I felt like I didn't want to let you down. How do you do that?
Awesome. Um, there's a lot of ways. I think the first thing to do is like we talked about before, setting them up to succeed. So you don't want to be the guy who's like, I expect everyone to come prepared, but I'm not going to prepare it. So I'm going to pick the set list like an hour before, and I'm going to change it when we're there. And I don't know what the harmonies are, and I couldn't tell you what the tempo is, or anything. Like, there's no charts. So be realistic. If you really want them to be prepared, then help them prepare. And then if they still come unprepared, then you can have that conversation like, hey, did you not hear the vocal practice track? Like when I was singing the alto, did you not hear that? Oh, you didn't know it was there, or oh, you just blew it off. Well, that's not cool. But also, it starts with you as the leader. But I think also there's a way when people do it well, like for you would come to rehearsal and you know it better than me. I'm going to publicly stop everything and be like, dude, Kevin, you're killing it, man. I could tell you worked on this. You were in the practice room. Thank you, man. You sound amazing. You nailed that fill, and your pocket's right on, dude. So like, hey, let's all give Kevin a round of applause, which sounds silly, and maybe they're like, but then they go, oh, if I would like some recognition like that from the worship leader. Maybe I should do that too. And so it's just a positive reinforcement. And you don't have to call them out publicly. Like, I can tell you didn't prepare, so we're gonna make everybody. That should probably be a private conversation, but just celebrating that. But there's also an opportunity to explain. Before we have rehearsal, we always sit down and talk. And an opportunity for me to cast vision. We are here to help people encounter the living God and to hear his voice, to say yes to him. So it's so important that we eliminate all distractions. And we really don't want to be practicing the songs tonight. We want to be practicing worship together, which is a very different thing. Yeah. So thankful that you guys listened and you know your lyrics and your parts and when you come in and when you're not supposed to be in, because we don't have to stop to learn. Just practice what it feels like to do it together and see what God is doing uniquely in us. And so isn't that awesome? Wasn't that so cool how God moved in that song? Nobody could have anticipated that or practiced for it. You had to be here and you had to be prepared. Man, that was awesome. So just positive reinforcement and explaining as well.
That's good. Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate it. That really changed my perspective on things, when I was first going to Mountain View. And you're one of the only individuals I know that has this, like, I don't know, you release this type of aroma, like, man, I don't want to disappoint, man. I want to come prepared. I want to show up, on time. I want to be punctual. I want to know my parts. I want to be able to play right. So I always appreciated that, Matt, and it's just helped me, since I was a kid. I think I met you almost 10 years ago now.
Yeah, man.
Next year will be 10 years.
Crazy.
Funny story. This is a little tangent, but when I first started at Cornell, I didn't know that Tommy was teaching there. I didn't know that he was conducting a songwriting class and a worship CCM class, right? So I signed up for the course because I was like, I just want to take a worship course, because I've never had before. And I noticed his name by it. I was like, oh wow, Tommy's teaching here, cool. I remember he had done a concert at Mountain View years before, and I was like, I met him. I still even have the picture with him, and my hair's all flat and all these things, and we took a picture. What's up?
Were you going like this in the picture?
Yes, I was. I still do that. So we take a picture. I kept it in my files, and years later, I come to the school, and within the first week, I signed up for the course. I think I started school Monday, and the first class with Tommy was scheduled for Wednesday. So Wednesday comes, I'm all excited. the class starts around 7, and Tommy doesn't show up. He sends his sub, which would be Jacob Park.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of
Yeah.
the worship leaders also at Christian Assembly. He sends Jacob to sub in for him, and Jacob starts taking a role. And so when he starts calling out people's names, he says Kevin Chong, and I raise my hand. I'm like, present. He's like, okay, cool, whatever. We do the whole class. Class is over. The following week, we come, back to school, and I'm hoping Tommy's gonna be there, obviously, because I haven't seen Tommy in 5-6 years, and Tommy shows up, so he's taking roll again, and taking everybody's names down, and he looks at me, he looks directly at me, and he kind of squints a bit, and he goes, Kevin Chong, and I said, oh my gosh, Tommy remembers me from Mountain View. Like, he legit remembered me from Mountain View, and like we're talking about how many thousands of churches has around the world has Tommy been to, and I was like, he remembered me. He knows my name.
Come on now. Come on now.
And so I'm doing the whole class. We're playing drums, all these things. At the end of the class, I go straight to him. Everybody's pretty much gone, and I go to Tommy and I said, Tommy, how did you remember my name from like 5-6 years ago at Mountain View Faith Community in Rancho Cucamonga? I'm giving him all the details I can, because I'm like, how could you remember my name? I didn't even play drums for you, and I just had met you. And he starts to laugh. He's cracking up. He's like, man, he's like, I didn't remember your name. Jacob just told me, like, hey, bro, there's this Asian looking drummer who's a Peruvian who happens to play drums. He's pretty good, and he's in your class, so you're gonna have a lot of fun with him. And he started cracking up, and he's telling me the story, and I said, Tommy, I'm so disappointed.
That's awesome, dude. I love it.
And I always remind him, every time I see him, I said, Tommy, I still can't believe you did that to me, man. And so it's just funny moments, man. Funny moments. But Matt, before we wrap up, I want to ask you, what advice do you have for up and coming musicians? Just in general, what do you want to share with them? It doesn't just have to be for church. What do you recommend, or what advice do you have for just aspiring musicians that want to do music at a professional level?
Okay, I have two things. Number one is I would say that, how do I say this? Be unique in that you are responsible and reliable and a stable person, because there are so many of us creative people who are not that and who may be good and gifted at our instrument, but like can't have a conversation with a human being, or cannot show up on time, just can't do it, or are just emotionally a wreck, and everyone is wondering, which version of Matt am I going to get at rehearsal tonight? The depressed guy or the overly excited guy? Like, this guy is just all over the place. And typically we think that because we're creative people that like we're excused, because we're always encouraged to give our unique expression of who we are and what's inside of us that God's given us, and just that informs our music uniquely, and that's awesome and good. But what's so funny is nobody wants to be a cliche, and yet so many of us are so cliche because we're unstable and we can't show up on time and we lose our music, or like, I lost my drum key again. Does anybody have one? I forgot my snare drum. It's like, really, dude? So like, if you really want to be unique, be the opposite of that. Like, show up on time, show up prepared, be nice, be friends with the people you're around. And I've just known so many incredible musicians that nobody wants to hang out with, and everybody is just tired of and doesn't want them to be on the gig. And it's like, it's really not that hard, right? And by the way, you'll be really unique, and you won't be a cliche if you just be responsible and like a nice person. So that'd be the number one thing I would say. And then number two would be I will go spiritual because I believe in Jesus Christ as the Lord and Savior of my life, who died for me just like he died for everybody else. And the stuff that we've shared today, the world cannot offer you. And there's no gig and there's no song that can compare to the power of God in your life and the relationship that you can have with him, to know what it's like to be healed in your body, or to hear his voice. You know, the God who created the universe would speak to you. There's nothing better. And not to mention, you have a lot in common with this God because he is the most creative being in the universe. He created the universe. He created music. And I want to hang out with that guy, right? Like, about the songs that you have, maybe you could share some stuff with me and we could jam, whatever, however you want to think about it. But there's nothing better than learning how to serve God with the gift of music instead of serving yourself. So I would encourage everybody who's listening to consider Jesus, because there's nothing better in the world, man.
Thank you, Matt. Everybody, this is Matt Ross from Pikes Peak Christian Church in Colorado Springs. Make sure you check out Kingdom of Heaven. Matt, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being the first Skype session call recording guest.
Yes.
We're trying this out. You know, he's obviously not in California, so it's great to be able to catch up and be able to talk about real life situations in church. You know, being what it is to be a musician. You know, all these elements and all these things. So thank you for your time, and I really appreciate it. And thank you, man. Appreciate
Love
it.
you, bro.
Love you too, man. So this is episode 6. Sir Kevin Says. Thank you guys for watching, and see you guys next time. Thanks for checking out episode number 6. Hope you guys enjoyed it. As I mentioned earlier, today was the first Skype episode that we have done here on the show. There will be times that I will have to do that because I cannot get every guest that I would like to here in California. Some friends of mine live, you know, across the country, or they are in different states, and so Skype is what we have to go for. But hopefully you guys enjoyed it and still stuck with it to the end. And if you have, thank you for doing that. If you have not already, go ahead and subscribe. If you are listening to the audio podcast, it's also available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can go ahead and follow and rate 5 stars on Apple Podcasts if you would like to do that. Episode number 7 comes out next week. Thanks for checking it out, and we will see you guys